Hey, here we are. I'm Scott Tempesta from Sailing Anarchy. This is our video interview series, which we're calling 15 Minutes of Fame. Of course, it won't actually be 15 minutes. It'll be something longer than that, but we'll try to keep it reasonable length. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Stuart Johnstone, and you should probably already know who that is, but if you don't, he's the marketing chief of J-Boats. He's been with the company for how long, Stu?
On and off for over 30 years.
There you go. And so obviously, Stu, J-Boats has seen a lot, has been a large part of all of our racing and sailing. I mean, I don't think there could be anybody that hasn't possibly been touched in some way or another by a J-Boat. And so we're going to get into that. We also have some really good questions from the anarchists, and we'll get into those a little bit later. But Stu, first and foremost, how are you doing? How are you and your family holding up through all this?
Well, here in Newport, we've been blessed with some pretty good weather most of the time. A couple of crazy weather patterns have come through with snow, wind, rain, hail, you name it. But we're surviving and looking out after friends where we can, and hunkered down just like everybody else is at home, just trying to keep things moving along in the world of J-Boats worldwide. So we're doing okay, thank goodness.
Good. Yeah, to say it's a delicate balance is an understatement for sure. Let's talk about J-Boats. What is the current state of J-Boats in terms of where the company is, how your production is, where J-Boats is today?
Well, we've been fortunate to have a very loyal following of owners over the course of time. J24 owners that are still buying and selling bigger boats as they got older, and so on and so forth. The newest, the current phenomenon of the J70 continues on, not just here in the U.S., but particularly in Europe.
How many have you built now?
Of the sailing leagues, 1,600 plus J70s.
Crazy.
And so, yeah, it's been an extraordinary growth path for that class, and it continues to grow, in particular in Europe, because of the advent of these sailing leagues in all the countries. Most of the countries in Europe have standardized on the J70 for their sailing leagues. So they're getting tens of thousands of people across Europe sailing on that boat. And as a result, what ends up happening is most local clubs, sailing clubs that participate, usually end up buying 1, 2, or 3 boats to practice in. And as they've discovered, it's such a fun, easy boat to sail that they're getting their kids and women out on the boats, which they historically would have never gotten engaged in the past, and other kinds of classes that they had historically across Europe. In so many clubs, think of the lakes in Switzerland and in Germany, they all have their own little local one design boat for their own yacht club. So the yacht club might have 6 or 7 of them, but they couldn't participate against other clubs because they didn't have their boats. So they had to go sell their boats. So they it was an amazing decision, quite frankly, of most major clubs across Europe to say, let's just standardize on this one boat and we can all sail them everywhere, and it's fair. And they could include older people, younger people, women, and the kids in particular love it because the parents just send them out and said, you can go sailing wherever you want, which is kids don't like to have adult supervision sometimes. So
no, we mean sometimes, none of the time, right?
So the sense of adventure for these kids is great because they just love to go out there and go have some fun.
Of course, on a nice boat. But of course now, I mean, most people can't sail at all. I mean, here in San Diego, no recreational boating at all. A lot of areas are following suit. Different parts of the country are doing something different. Different parts of the world are doing something. But the one thing that I wanted to ask you is I think that the success of the 70 really comes through when these major J70 regattas are held, right? A lot of them in Miami,
Yep.
wherever they might be. I mean, 50 to 100 boats, easily, right? In a lot of these. So now that's kibosh, right? There's none of that. So what do you do, or do you do anything to keep the fleet engaged, energized? I mean, how does, as the builder and the holder of this fleet in so many ways, how do you keep that group, engaged?
Well, what's happened in the 70 class is they have their own there's a European class, there's the U.S. class, and then there's the international. And what the classes themselves have been doing is consulting with the owners, the principal owners and fleet captains across the continental Europe, of course, and here in the U.S. And for example, right in your backyard, the World Championships were supposed to take place in Long Beach at Cal Yacht Club.
Marina Del Rey.
Yeah, so they postponed that to next year at about roughly the same time, which of course is disappointing. But everybody who was on board said, this is a much smarter move to be proactive and postpone it. The enthusiasm is there. I mean, it's palpable. Anytime I have friends that have called me up, or I've called them just out of the blue to see how they're doing, everybody can't wait to get back sailing. So the limitation is, quote unquote, when the country is reopened, or the states and the governors themselves reopen the states. And the irony from our perspective is that, knowing several governors who are sailors and former governors, that we've, through other friends that I know, have been imploring them to allow sailing to take place, because you can do it in a socially distanced, safe way.
Yes, you can. And out here, clearly, Governor Newsom, who we love and just think is a fabulous leader, he hasn't gone sailing because it's a bit of a shutdown almost everywhere. Switching gears a little bit, so we're in this state of the COVID virus, and like you said, there's a lot of shutdown. I think people are really hesitant to spend much money. How when you tap into like your dealer network, do you ask them, what they're seeing in their area? I mean, how do you guys as a company, and then also through your dealer networks, how do you guys look at this current situation today and try to anticipate tomorrow? And can you even anticipate a tomorrow? Do you have that in a time frame?
It's interesting. I usually work out of my house anyways, so staying at home is perfectly fine.
So do I.
So that first things first. So my cousin Jeff, who's the president, I was just in the office there yesterday or the day before, talking to him about this very issue, and he's been very engaged with the dealers worldwide, talking to the guys in Germany and France and Switzerland and Russia. I mean, all over the place, down in Chile and so on and so forth. So they've been communicating back and forth, and they've been taking this opportunity, now that they have a little bit more time on their hands, to go through things like fine-tuning their websites, fine-tuning their newsletters, working on stuff that they normally wouldn't be focused on, but now have the time to do so, updating their brokerage programs. We're coming up with, for example, a brokerage program for our dealers that we'll be putting on our site to help current owners who are interested in moving into some of our other boats to sell their boats. So those are the kind of activities that have been taking place, and they're very active. I mean, the dealers are constantly thinking, trying to work through ways when things start to open up again, how to go take care of the needs of their customers and clients. And now, having said that, I've had, over the course of the last 3 weeks, every time I send out the J newsletter, I get really funny comments, depending on what I wrote, whether it was, about the clipper ship Flying Cloud, and, John Masefield's Sea Fever poem and others. And it's been inspiring to, see what other people are thinking along those lines, really from an emotional support standpoint. And so, but the irony is that they're all thinking about sailing. And in fact, I would say in the last 3 weeks, about a dozen people, some people that I don't know, some people that I do, they're still thinking about, well, I'm going to be moving from this place to that place, or I've had this boat and I'm going to sell it. And so what do you think about, a new boat? So it's still, they're still engaged. I mean, they haven't lost they're probably even more passionate and enthusiastic about it, because it's one of their natural outlets. If they're not working,
right,
they love to sail. And
if you can't, if you can't sail, you're like chomping at the bit for the day that you can. Focusing a little bit on J Boats. So from a production standpoint, have orders slowed down, or is it too soon to sort of feel any of that for you guys? And are you guys doing any production layoffs, reduction in pay, any of sort of that thing?
No, we have, well, as you may know, we work with contract manufacturers for our boats around the world.
Right.
And so it's different in each place. So for example, here in the US, because we're in Rhode Island, boat manufacturing is considered an essential business, thank goodness. So all Governor Raimondo, working with, what's his name, Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, and others in Connecticut, they've all worked together to keep what they consider essential businesses open for each state. And certainly here in Rhode Island, it's boat building. Our builder in Bristol, they're still working. In the last 3 weeks, we've taken delivery of several boats, J80s, J99s, and a couple of other boats. And as I said, my cousin Jeff, who looks after all that stuff, he's been going back and forth. He's working every day, and he's putting a lot of hours in because these boats were ordered ahead of time. They're still coming in. They're still getting delivered.
Right.
So Bristol, our operation in Bristol is open. They're still building boats. Yes, the order book in the US has definitely slowed down or been delayed because nobody knows what the outcome is on the other side of this pandemic routine. The Europeans, France shut them down. They said they had the same argument that our guys did. They said, look, our American counterparts are working, WTF. So and we're here in the boat building capital of France, between La Rochelle, the Sable d'Olonne, La Trinité, Sur-Mer. And they said, we should all be open. Benetouge, everybody, we should all be open because we don't put our workers, next to each other. They're spread out, for goodness sakes. And so they tried to make the argument that they were essential, but the French government wouldn't buy it. I was really surprised.
Mm.
So they've been shut down now for 2 weeks, but they think they keep arguing their case. They think they may be able to reopen next week.
Wow.
Even though Paris might be on lockdown and some other big cities might be on lockdown, that they would be able to start again. And the irony is that the last boat they delivered was a J99 to Switzerland, to Lucerne, Lake Lucerne.
Let's face it, Stu, sailboats are goddamn essential.
Absolutely.
Right? No doubt about it. Hey,
You know what I want
to do? I'm going to go to, so I put something out on the front page of Sailing Anarchy. And by the way, if people don't know, there's an actual J-Boat Anarchy forum amongst our list of forums, which is brought to you by, coincidentally, J-Boats. And it is a really fabulous resource to find out virtually anything you want to know about any J-Boat. And if you don't know the answer to a question, just ask it, and somebody in there will answer it. So I got some great questions from readers, and I want to run these by you, okay?
All right, go for it.
Cool. This is At Last is his name, and I'm not sure. And it says, for Stu, this is kind of a theoretical pushing technology moonshot kind of question. Is there something on the far horizon, say 5 years or more, that you see technology-wise that could change the product line in a quantum leap kind of way, i.e. take a J111, drop its speed potential OR rating, PHRF rating, for example, down to like a -20 or something, be it design, materials, outside factors, sales, appendages, etc. In effect, will something like the 111 in 10 years look like a foiling moth with that kind of speed, yet still have a usable interior?
Well, we talk about this internally all the time. What do we see coming over the horizon, and how might it apply to the base that we have of sailors and their experience? And we know that our demographic is largely family, mom and dad, kids, and guys that really enjoy their one design racing, who are real, fanatics about that kind of stuff. When my brother Peter was building the catamarans, the gunboats, he did take that, what I consider a pretty significant risk, to go into the foiling world and build that 40-footer with the guys in the Netherlands, in Holland. And so it worked, but they sold 2 boats. So we're not in the business of selling 2 boats. We're in the business of selling several hundred or 1,000. So as a result, what happens for us is that we evaluate these technologies. We've looked at canting keels. We've looked at, inflatable sails, everything you could think of. canting mass, like the trimaran, the offshore trimarans have. But it's the hardest thing for us to do, honestly, is to make sure that it appeals to a broad audience for us. And we have, as you would guess, you look at some of our J125 owners in the past. I mean, some of those guys are pretty fanatical about their sailing and they love it, and they like to push the envelope. But even then, that's kind of a reach even for our more advanced racers, if you will. And we always, encourage people. We've had many of our guys go off into the TP52 world, for example. Past owners are in the mini maxi, the 72s, on and on. America's Cup racers, skippers. We're exposed to the leading edge or the bleeding edge of sailing technology all the time because of our relationships with the sailmakers, with North and Quantum Sails, and of course, and all the main materials manufacturers. So we here in Newport, thank goodness, you're constantly being exposed to the advanced thinkers, kind of the futurists. What if you guys could do something like this? But again, it has to come back to, does it fit, our demographic of the owner base?
Sure.
Are they willing to buy it?
Right, and that's a question that you probably don't want to probe too far, because the answer might not be a good one. Like, for example, 2 boats, right, being sold.
Exactly.
That kind of stuff. So this is perfect. So you mentioned the J125. So if there's a theme of people's interest in J boats, this is a perfect one. Please ask if the J125 hull and deck mold is still around.
You cannot believe how many times that question has been asked.
Right.
Over the course of time.
Right.
What ended up happening with those molds when, I don't know if you know the history of this, but when TPI went bust because John Walton, who was the oldest member of the Walton family, Sam Walton's eldest son, he was chairman of Walmart.
Yep.
And he loved sailing.
Yep.
He loved ultralights, and that was the end of his life. So, sadly enough, but what happened was that his venture capital group was running TPI, and they basically said, we want 30% IRR, and that doesn't happen in boat building. So it got torpedoed, and along with that, the J125 hull and deck, everything got chopped up. There was there at TPI. Everything, absolutely
really?
everything got chopped up.
Oh man, you're gonna
including
break
125 hull and deck.
Stu, you're gonna break a lot of hearts with that.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Here's one. This is Swim Sailor, and he wants to know, what's the next J boat?
Oh, we've got 3 on the board, and one's already started, and we haven't publicly announced it yet. But it's a larger cruising, high-performance cruising boat, because we haven't had a boat in the 45-foot plus range now for almost 20 years. So we've had to, again, think of J24 sailors from early 80s, 90s, and other people that graduated up through our One Design classes. Now they've either, are in the C-suite, they're CEOs, or they run their own companies, small business owners, and they want something that's larger, more comfy to sail. A lot of them have been avid racers. But these are the baby boomers in their 50s, 60s, 70s that still want to go sail, and they want, think of I'm sure you've seen the J44, the J160, J145.
Right, exactly. I was just going to ask you, is this an updated version of the J145?
Yeah, think of that whole genre of boats, but with the modern twist of how my cousin Al's doing an amazing job designing boats, and he has really a gift, and he's come up with a whole new approach to how you design a bigger, faster, more comfy cruising boat that a racer would appreciate.
It's interesting, just to talk about the designs real quickly, and I'll get back to some of the reader questions. You guys have done there's hardly a J boat, and I'm not saying this to blow smoke. There's hardly a J boat that you don't look at and don't say, wow, that's a handsome boat. I was even looking at a J120 the other day. I was walking the docks at the yacht club, San Diego Yacht Club, because that's really all you could do is literally walk the docks. You can hang out on your boat, but nothing else. And I was cruising around with my girlfriend, and there was a J145 there, and there's J120s, there's J160s, and you guys have done such a good job keeping the boats looking really nice. Just in terms of perspective, low cabin house, which is always really
Yep.
attractive to me, right? Relatively straightish shears, nice windows. So just from a visual standpoint, your boats have always been really nice looking. Here's another question. How many J88s have been built?
Oh, I think 125.
Okay.
A lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. That is
It's
a lot.
what's neat about that boat, it's a very active class. I mean, the people that have that boat are just really passionate about it. They love it because it's slightly over horsepowered. I mean, think of it almost like a starboat, 28-foot starboat.
Which is, by the way, slightly overpowered is a rarity for a J boat. Okay,
exactly. And that's why, no, seriously. So in places like Long Island Sound, the lighter air areas, they love it because, in the 2 to 4 or 5 knot range, it's damn near as fast as a J111.
Is it? Yeah, they're cool. There's one in San Diego. At least there was one. Let me see. Black Dog wants to know. I know this is good. He goes, I know it's like asking someone to name their favorite child, but ask Stu what his favorite J boat is.
That's almost an impossible question. I love racing the J70s because it's a really fun class. It's an easy boat to sail. You can get any friends to come sailing with you because it's only basically 4 people, and you can sail anywhere in the world.
Right.
So,
good answer. Good politically correct answer.
That's true though.
Shaggy Baxter in Australia wants to know what you think of hard chines and beamy designs.
And what designs?
Beamy.
Oh, beamy. Oh,
Fat.
the again, always a great debate whenever the design team gets together, which is primarily my Uncle Rodney and Al and Jeff. Every once in a while, they say, you got to come in and chat with us about it and brainstorm a little. And I always send them pictures. I'm constantly sending them pictures of what other people are doing.
Right.
And but the number one requirement for any of our boats is that it actually has to go upwind. So that's a key component. Whether if you're a cruiser, and your engine kicks out, you got to be able to sail home to safety upwind. And if you have a beamy boat with hard chines, the biggest problem that they have, look at the IC-37 that the New York Yacht Club commissioned. That's a boat that's notorious for lifting its rudder out of the water at the weather mark. And as you bear off, the big fat rear end on it, the big fat ass and the hard chine lifts the rudder out of the water.
Yep. Sure.
Which is why
they have 2. You
see those amazing pictures of teams bearing off the weather mark, and then they do an auto broach into the boat next to them. So there you go. If you're going to go offshore downwind the entire time, yes, you would have what we call a wedge of cheese. So
right.
Every single boat that wins the Transquadra and all those other things that go from Europe down to the Caribbean, all those are wedges of cheese. They're hard chine boats. And I predicted about 20 years ago when a friend of mine wanted to go build a 50-foot scow offshore. I said, it's a brilliant idea. No one's thinking about it. Make it a canteen keeler and put 2 rudders on it. Basically a giant A-scow. And, having sailed in the Midwest in the past with Hunts and Harry Melgus, they raced J24s. They were a J-boat dealer for us for probably 20 plus years.
Sure.
And I sailed and raced scows, A-scows, E-scows, M20s, and they're really, really fun boats to sail and insanely fast. And so I encouraged them to build this 50-foot scow. And only now are you seeing that adopted in the minis. Sure, it's 20 years later.
Right.
And so, but again, a lot of innovation in sailing is historical. Think of us with the quote pioneers of retractable sprits. Well, a clipper ship had a sprit back in 1880 and before. So it's not a novel idea. It was just that, well, the only thing novel was the ability to retract the damn thing.
Right.
So
right.
it wasn't, we didn't invent anything new. A sprit has been around for over almost 2 centuries. So at the end of the day, it's the same routine in offshore design. I mean, we've even jokingly looked at cruising scows from our standpoint. Why? Because inside
Yeah.
gives you massive amounts of room.
Volume, right? Yeah, right. Exactly.
Volume.
No, that's
But
funny.
as soon as it tips up, there's zero wetted surface.
Right. That's very true.
So it's a really clever design in that respect. So
I like that.
my 2 cents.
PWAP, he's in the Bay Area. He wants to know, this is a good one. Ask Stu if he still has the Chevy Nova he lent me in Newport back in the 80s. It was a piece of junk, but it ran as far as the candy store.
No, it wasn't a Nova. It was a Rabbit.
Oh, it was a Rabbit?
It was a Volkswagen Rabbit. Yeah, it was on its last legs.
So needless to say, you don't still have it.
No, it's long gone.
All right. A sailman from Portsmouth, Rhode Island. Question for Stu. With the exception of the J34 and the J41, J-boats have had their own style and focus in terms of design. Newer models seem to be more focused towards IRC type forming. Why shift away from a successful model?
Oh, the 2 answers to that question. Europe is a big influence on some of the boats that they want to go create for their market. And IRC and ORC, by the way, is a very big deal there. So in Europe, when they came up with the 97E, the 112E in particular, 122E, they need type forming, if you will. They need to fit it in to optimize for what they do there as family racer cruisers. So the 112E, for example, last year or the year before, won the World Championship and the European Championship in both IRC and ORC, and it's a cruising boat. I mean, when people in Europe look at it, they think it's a cruising boat because there's actually a nice interior in it. It's not stripped.
Right.
So it's appealing to mom and the kids, for example. Women actually like the boat because it's got the creature comforts inside of it. Here in the U.S., we have our predominant handicap racing fleet is perf.
Yep.
You know, for better or for worse. But so at the end of the day, it's not type forming. It's really whatever you want to create. And come hell or high water, they're going to tag you with some kind of a handicap number, as you know well. You know, dealing with this SoCal perf guys. So here in the U.S., it's much less type forming because they're the only major events you think of the Bermuda race or the Chicago Mackinac race, the Bayview Mac race, those kinds of things, or the stuff offshore there in California, for example. A lot of them are coming around to the ORR and ORC. And so if there are more races are going to ORC, in fact, New York Yacht Club still, I think, they haven't made that decision yet, to host the ORC, IRC Worlds here in Newport. Later, I think it's in September. So that's still on the schedule. But as I said, because of the logistics and what's going on in Europe and what's going on here, they may still postpone it till next year because there's just too many people, too many big boats, and the logistics will just do you in.
You know, and at some point, Stu, I mean, people could complain about that here, about those designs and how they're different. But at some point, you have to go where your market is, right? You have to service that market and create a boat or boats that fits within the niche of what those people are doing. And they're doing it in relatively large volumes, correct?
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. So it makes sense to me. Here's somebody wants to know, oh, here's a good one. This is from Meatwad. He wants to know, why are J-boats so fracking expensive?
It's because it's not single skinned like all of our competitors. We actually try to build a quality boat. I mean, it's hard when you think of the cost of our materials that go into that boat are probably double any of our competitors, just the cost of the materials. Think about that. So we're not using junky resins and junky laminates and cores and everything else. We literally try to have the best of every single category. So as part of that process, when we spec a boat for mast, for example, we're not going to go find the cheapest aluminum mast from whomever or the cheapest carbon rig. We're going to try to find a carbon rig optimized for the boat, specifically designed for the boat. Well, a mast, for example, on a 112E carbon rig, just the carbon mast itself, forget anything else that's hanging on it, is going to be well close to the $50,000 mark. Just
for the tube,
rig.
right? Just for the tube, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
So there's a reason why it's expensive. It's because the quality built into it lasts for decades. It's not designed to be disposable.
Got it. And it makes sense to me. So there you go, Meatwad. There's your answer. This is fairly interesting. This is from IMR. He's in the Bay Area also. With all the successes at J-Boats, and most of it can be credited to an amazing marketing effort over the years. Take, for example, the J24s. It's a total POS by all measures. The only thing that made it successful was the marketing and huge fleets. This is true with almost all J-Boats to this day, with an exception of a few key designs. So why did the FAR 40 beat out the J125 with its marketing and outreach? Both boats were launched at relatively the same time. Both cost about the same time when new. J-Boats made 16 J125s compared to 140 FAR 40s. The world would be a much better place if we had 140 J125s blasting about. And I think that's really the question: is why did the FAR 40 take off and the J125 did not?
The irony is both those boats were built almost next to each other here in Rhode Island. Number one.
Right, I know that.
It's really funny because Barry Carroll Marine was building most of those FAR 40s.
Yep.
But if you know anything about the construction of a FAR 40, you would know why they were so cheap. Number one. And my dad and my uncle at the time were involved. They said, we're just going to come up with a better, more fun boat. And so the J105, of course, the world's first sprit boat of the modern era, was built, created, and produced in 1991. And it wasn't not long thereafter, the FAR 40 came out, and then Bob and Rod said, well, we can have much more fun with a really lightweight, very high-tech built boat. It was close to twice as much as the FAR 40 out the door FOB Rhode Island.
That's really all you need to say, right? I mean, that is the bottom line, right?
Yeah. So think about this. So the construction, a FAR 40 was just basically glass and some core and glass all slopped in, and no keel girders, keels falling off, all that great stuff. Rudders breaking all the time. So they had a huge, very enormous warranty problem with virtually every FAR 40. We've had slim to none on the J125, even 25-year-old boats,
right? If
they've been well cared for. Look at Dr. Laura, you know her.
Of course.
I mean, her red boat is cherry. I mean, it's perfect. And they haven't had to rebuild the boat. She just takes care of it. And so the reason is that it was such a high-tech boat that if you tried to reproduce that boat today, you know what it would cost? Just the boat and a carbon rig?
How much?
Nearly $1 million for a 41-footer. And the reason is because the inner and outer skins were carbon and epoxy.
Right. And
then the core material, we had a separate mold just for the core to heat form the foam core to the hull, preformed.
Wow.
Which is insanely costly. So you're basically building two boats to build one.
Got it.
So and it was triple vacuum bagged, no less. So, which is a classic custom construction. So the outer skin, then that preformed foam core was then vacuumed in, and then the inner skin was vacuumed in. I mean, it was a ridiculously expensive construction method.
Jay, Stu, I want you to build the white trash J125, where it's none of the high tech anything, just slop it together like the Carroll boats. Could you build? I mean, have you guys ever thought of building? And I think I've asked you this before. You guys thought about building a lower cost version of a boat? Like, so let's use the J125, where it's not carbon, and it does, don't go through all those processes. and have it be something in a price range that people would find more palatable?
Well, you know, the interesting thing about that question, Scott, is the what we did, because of the interest in the 125. We knew that all those guys were going to go sail offshore. They weren't going to go around the buoys. So what happened was, when the 111 was created, this came up. This discussion came up, and so the push was to make the 111 as powerful and as light as you could get in a 36-footer, because we knew it was a big marketplace, and people were to have a lot of fun sailing with the boats. And as you know, even down in your area in San Diego, with Jorgensen's sailing their Picosa, the J111, they're having a ball because they get anywhere near the conditions that that boat excels in, and they simply win. I mean, every race last year, they silvered. Either won, got second or third, every single race. And so that's a proven SoCal offshore boat. And those guys that know how to sail it, love it.
It's a cool boat and a handsome boat too. How many of those, by the way, did you build?
About the same as the 88, about 125.
Okay.
So it was a very good run for that boat. But
So
the modern answer out of our strategies for addressing the needs of owners was, we came up with a J121. And so the J121 was specifically designed to be a more powerful offshore reaching boat. And as you saw last year in the Transpac race, the J125s cleaned house.
Yes.
But that's because they started in a much more powerful weather pattern than the J121 did almost 2 days earlier.
Right.
And so when you look at the actual data of them moving through the water later in the race, when they're all in the same wind conditions and wave conditions, the 121 would have beaten them on handicap, no problem.
Really interesting.
Yeah, we were doing that analysis because we could see on the tracker what kind of progress they're making day to day from halfway through the race on down to the finish. And our friends Scott Grealish from Oregon has a beautiful, I'm sure you've seen it, that beautiful navy blue hull with white bottom.
Yes, I sure have.
It's just gorgeous boat. And those guys sailed the hell out of that thing, just like the 125 guys did. But those guys were screaming down the waves. They said they could not believe the speeds they're attaining. And they were matching the 125 speeds down off the waves.
I'm not surprised. I mean, if boat design can't progress to the point where the 121 would be faster than the 125 in a lot of conditions, then we haven't progressed very far at all, as good as the 125 is, right? Let's see, here's another question. This is Bravo. I'm not sure where he's from. Asked Stu if the J124, or if the J24, excuse me. By the way, the J124 is a very cool boat, and the J122 is a cool boat, but that's another conversation. Asked Stu if the J24 was based on a Morse 24 design named Mad Dog, and if the boat made its entry anywhere else but New England, does he think it would have taken off like it did?
Oh, I don't know what Buddy's talking about. The Rodney had spent the better part of thanks, sweetie. Rodney had spent the better part of 3 years dreaming about how to build a boat in his garage, and so his limit was 24 feet, the length of the garage with the door closed.
Right. I do remember that.
So the only measurement that he forgot to take into account was, after you create the frames upside down in the garage, and then put the flexible core material on top and then glass it, was that the boat actually gets thicker. So the boat was just a little bit wider than the garage when he was finished. And it wasn't built on anything that any other big boat, keel boat. He actually was a 470 and 505 sailor. So if you look at a 505 upside down and you look at the J24, you'll see it's a very reminiscent kind of look and approach to a hull design, because he loves sailing the 505. So the reason he designed the J24 the way he did was because he wanted the boat to plane as a keel boat. And you got to remember, despite the fact that people may call it a POS today, if they don't know the history of when it was designed, there are some serious POSs back then called quarter tonners. Okay, so that was the only competitor out there in the marketplace that people were buying in any numbers.
Yeah.
were production quarter tonners. So when you bring a fractional rig into a race and everybody else has masthead 24 footers, wildly broaching all over the place downwind when it's blowing 20 to 30, right, and the J24 is up in planing. That was like, you got to be kidding me. That's not fair.
Believe it or not, my dad actually bought one of the first J24s, and we were sailing, I think Morsea. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And we made the pole like a foot and a half longer, and we put on slightly bigger Genoas, and boat really took off in light air. I mean, it was like a sort of a turbo version, if you will. And that was really, really fun. And the last question was, here's the last one from Sports Car, also in Australia. Last question. I'm keen to hear Stu's views on the 15-year-old J133 that finished top 10 overall, 9th overall IRC, and first in Division 5 RC, as well as first in Division 4 ORCI, and right in the mix of fleet of carbon one-offs in the 2019 Sydney Hobart race.
Sydney Hobart race, yeah. Yeah, I got a really nice story from the owner of the boat. He said they base, again, they're a bunch of dinghy sailors, I-14 sailors. They sail a bunch of skiff sailors from Sydney. I mean, that was a really good team that he'd assembled, put together. And again, they just sailed the hell out of the boat. And the 133 is, again, in good hands. Most of our boats can get on the podium and point it in the right direction. And so certainly from our perspective, it's a matter of how good is the team. The boat's capable of doing it, which is what the 133 was basically demonstrating to the rest of the world, that here's all these carbon racers and they're finishing in the middle of all these carbon racers.
Right.
So that's because it's got a reasonable rating and these guys know how to sail the hell out of it.
Know how to sail it.
That's simple.
You know what I want to do for our next one, Stu, assuming you'll do another one? I want to go through, I'll have the list of every single J boat made and every model, and I'll give you a minute to describe each one. So I'll go, J22, and you can say, and we'll go right, and listen, it might take longer than an hour. There's a lot of boats.
There's 38 designs.
Okay, so we'll do a 38-minute interview, plus my bullshit, whatever I have to say. But I think that'd be fun to go through and just hear your, just off-the-cuff thoughts of all of these boats. That'd be super fun.
Sure.
We'll do that. Well, listen, I'm going to say goodbye today. Thank you, dude. I mean, I really appreciate the time. It's always fun to talk to you. And I think you answered everybody's question, which is amazing. Although I'm sure people will complain in the forum about the answers that you gave. But we'll plan on doing this again.
Terrific. Well, I want to thank you, Scott, and thank all the anarchists out there around the world for participating in this fun little discussion while we're all sitting at home dreaming about sailing.
Exactly. Hey, thanks very much, my friend. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.